for many years in solidarity with social movements in Honduras and with human rights groups, especially promoting and advocating in defense of to the United States in a law that probably she'll be able to speak later with us about. And she is currently working with the Congress. Welcome. It's a real pleasure to have you with us, Dana. Thank you, Dana. It's a great pleasure. Thank you. We welcome also Gretchen. Gretchen is the founder and director, Gretchen Kuhner, of the Institute for Women in Migration. It's a nonprofit organization based in Mexico that works to advocate and advance rights for women and move in the movement in the region generally. Thank you so much, Gretchen, for being with us today. Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. And finally, Alvaro Montenegro, who is a young journalist and activist who has been reporting and publishing editorials in different prints, including the New York Times. He has played an important role also in building the democratic movement in Guatemala through the movement #RenunciaYa that ousted President Oro Perez Molina in 2015, and now he continues being active with the new name, #JusticeYa. Alvaro, it's a pleasure and honor to have you with us. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you for saying that I'm still young. Of course. Thank you so much. We're going to now go on to the topic because there's so much to talk about. Miriam, why don't we allow you to begin? What is the reality that Kamala Harris is going to face when she gets to Central America in Honduras? What is the reality in which Honduras is right now when Kamala is getting there for the first time?
First of all, good evening. It's a great pleasure to be able to share with you a few moments because we know this is very little time, actually. Thank you to Global Exchange for opening up this debate, which is so necessary and important. So since we have such a brief time, I'd like to just point out a few things that we all know, and I think everyone knows, that to do a summary, Honduras is a country that is lacking institutionality. It was destroyed after the failed coup attempt. People talk about 2009, but we also had 2012 and 2016. It's important to understand that Honduras is also a country where impunity runs rampant. And it's a country that has been kidnapped by criminal groups and narco groups. It's the most vulnerable country for climate change, and we can see that with the recent hurricanes that were hit our country last year. And the situation we faced given the climate crisis, it's the most dangerous country for defending human rights. Honduras is where we are criminalized, we are disappeared, and other human rights defenders have disappeared. And we've seen people in Huapinol who have been incarcerated for 2 years just for defending their right to water and for the Huapinol River. What's the worst thing is that Honduras is a country where people are leaving by the thousands. It's horrendous. It's a country where people leave, and you can see them here. Everybody wants to leave. Everybody wants out. The caravans, and even though it has not been declared, it's a humanitarian crisis where people are leaving. Almost caravans of 10,000 people are leaving. And so it's critical. Because for me, specifically, I could say that this is an effect of this entire crisis that we're going through. But it's also very dangerous because when there's no youth to create a nation, that's dangerous for the country, for any country. People are leaving, and especially young people are leaving, and it's a serious crisis. But it's also a country where there's investments in security, but not health, food, dignified housing. And now they're focusing on special development areas where large regions are going to be handed over to foreign investors. But before I finish, because we have very little time, I'd like to say that people know this, Marco. Everyone knows it. It's well known by the United States. It's well known by the people in the United States, the decision makers in the United States, because that has been allowed and has been allowed to perpetuate in power a dictator who is connected to criminal organizations in our country. And he has been given a blessing. So the question now is, what kind of changes are going to be? What kind of change will Biden bring? Are they going to continue this same policy? Or will there be a change to create real investment in humans and resources so that people can stay? Because that's the thing. We need to invest here so people can stay in safety and security, in food, in housing, so people can have health care and well-being. I think that is the big problem. That is the core of it. And that's how I'd like to start the debate today with our colleagues. Thank you. Dana, let's talk more about Honduras, and we'd like to hear your opinion about the history of the United States with Central America, and specifically with Honduras. In 3 minutes, and we could do that. It's hard because for 100 years, the United States has been supporting capitalism and extractivism in Honduras, but since 2009, as Miriam said, the United States has supported the coup and the post-coup regime, especially the narco dictator Juan Orlando Hernandez, who stole the elections. And so the objective of the United States in Honduras has been promoting its policies, and that is extracting money through transnational corporations, support the military domination of the United States, and create a good context for investments for these transnational corporations, U.S. transnationals. And right now, in the United States, they also want to put a brake on immigration, not because they're concerned about the Honduran people's crisis, but because the Democrats are afraid of the Republicans who are using the subject of immigration, the supposed crisis of immigration, to attack the Democrats. And they're afraid, looking towards the 2022 and 2024 elections. So for many years, the United States has supported Juan Orlando and his military and police forces. That's been the history of the United States. And not only supporting the Honduran security forces, but also protecting the base of Sotocano, which is a very important base for the United States. So the United States, Biden, Obama, Trump, everybody has supported the security forces in Honduras. And Biden is a continuation of the policies that Obama had. Biden wants to provide more money to the military now, and the police, and the Honduran border police, through programs like CARSI, Central American Regional Security Initiative, and a lot of money that is coming through multinational banks. Much of that money, millions and millions of dollars, has through them and through USAID, which is providing funds to the police, and through programs that look benevolent, but they're for the bad police. Many of the programs that are anti-gang, for example, and supporting what Miriam said, as always, often Biden has this discourse of supporting civil society in Honduras as well as in the United States. And by civil society, what does Biden mean? As well as Obama felt the same thing. What they mean is people, groups that are puppets of the embassy, mostly the Association for a More Just Society, which receives millions and millions of dollars from the United States. And to end, I'd like to just underscore that this investment of money that Vice President Harris is talking about, if we look at the fine print, for example, what she said recently about several companies that are going to be, quote unquote, supporting the Northern Triangle. It's like Microsoft, MasterCard, and several other huge companies that are going to support programs, digital programs for micro businesses and things like this. And the micro businesses and small businesses of any kind are being killed by the gangs and the police. And the United States supports those forces. So there's a huge contradiction, because in the big policy of the United States has always been to support the government of Juan Orlando and his military. And on the other hand, they say, oh, we're supporting civil society, but not the civil society that is dying because they're trying to defend their lands and their work. Thank you so much, Dana, for this very chilling situation. But it is the reality that we face. Alvaro, when Kamala is going to Guatemala, she's had some conversations with representatives of civil society. Tell us, what is the political context that Kamala will find in Guatemala, and how things are there? Right now, Guatemala is going through a strong regression in the area of human rights, especially freedom of expression, the right to gather. And there are cases that are coming up that people are in the first line of the struggle against corruption. So that's the context. So there has been a real problem with the justice institutions. The Constitutional Court, which was the only independent body, is now into the hands of is also part of the network of impunities. So the context of all of this, we have gotten deeper into the criminalization, which leads to providing sort of an approval for a law against NGOs, and that puts them in uncomfortable situations. But there's also a criminalization of attorneys, including some of us who have presented suits in front of this court. And right now, the former superintendent of the tax organization is incarcerated. He carried out very important cases against the economic elite, and also the ex-investigator of the CICIG, which was the United Nations commission that led a lot of these cases, Ivan Arguello, and they are both incarcerated at this point for supposedly being involved in an act that has, it was illegally creating a political party. So that's the context that we're seeing right now. So that the prosecutor, Juan Francisco Sandoval, who is in charge of all of these cases, we call the FESI, which is the case against immunity, and the cases of CICIG are being very threatened in these days, especially because they have created suits to try to eliminate the FESI, to say that this office is illegal and it's against their actions are against the court. And there's clear notes that this may happen, to be able to disarticulate this whole office and this prosecutor's office, or perhaps suspend it and take him out of his position. So that's the context in which Kamala Harris arrives to the country. And we believe that the government of Guatemala is leading this. And something's going on, though, in Guatemala. It's a network, it's a medusa that is governing and has been governing all these years, regardless of who's the president. So there are possibly lessons or free elections and changes of government, and everything looks apparently legal, but the same criminal alliance continues to govern. and which is restoring the regime, which in 2015, in some countries, we called it the Guatemalan Spring that we went through. There have been advances, especially in terms of social advances, and there has been clear. We know how the system works, but in spite of knowing this, there has been a lot of attacks as well. So we also believe that the central part of this is, and who is using the criminal system to preside over their interests and to protect other people. So the current Attorney General has been supported from, and we have spoken to the United States, and we have said with the United States and other embassies that they need to verify really if this support is serving to criminalize people. So I think the Attorney General legitimizes herself with international cooperation, but I believe this pact of corruption is centralized there, and that's what we call this alliance.
Thank you, Alvaro. Thank you so much. And also, Dana, when you say that the programs sound good, but the aid falls into the hands of the bad police or they affect corruption. Gretchen, Kamala is also going to be going to Mexico, and the question is the same. Do you think that they're speaking here that there are two presidents who have made campaigns on progressive platforms, but now that when they come to the real negotiation, what is it you all think will something change or will it continue? Yeah, thank you so much, Marco. Well, first of all, I would just like to go back a little bit because when the Biden administration came in, yes, we began to analyze and hear the rhetoric, and even President Biden himself said, I learned from the mistakes, when I was vice president, and I'm going to do things differently. There are two strategies, supposedly, right, of the four that they have about the topic of migration and development. One is the regional strategy of protection, and the other is the strategy of at the root causes of immigration, right? And as Miriam was saying, and as Dana and Alvaro are saying, this administration is full of people who very well know the history. They really know very well about the interventions of the United States, the history. Nevertheless, we have had 6 months and we're starting to see the same, or it seems to be the same mistakes of past administrations. And so we, for example, if we look at very specific things, for example, Biden came in to office and he canceled MPP. So that was a terrible project that people were waiting for their cases of asylum in the northern border, and there were thousands of people who were waiting. He did cancel that, and so people began to enter, those who had open cases. These are real positive things. Nevertheless, in March, after the flows began to increase again, we saw immediately that the United States once again asked Mexico to go back to turn back people from the National Guard on the southern border. And once again, we are seeing people being denied on the border. There are violations of human rights. They're denied land. There are people who are trying to pass from Honduras, from Guatemala, El Salvador. And we feel very frustrated because we have the feeling of deja vu. And so Kamala is going to come, also as Alvaro mentioned, and Miriam, in a very complex context in Mexico, because this Sunday we have elections, and these are the most important elections in many years, because they're going to elect the entire House of Representatives, mayors, and many state governors, and Kamala is coming 2 days afterwards. And so, for example, this morning, in the front page of La Prensa, Kamala is going to come, canceled the meeting of the vice president in the Senate. That was the article today. And so I don't know. I think that this first visit is at a very complex time in Mexico, where civil society organizations had the hope of being able to speak with the team, the vice president's team, about these programs, the strategies, where we are going with regional protection, the strengthening of the Comar. But nevertheless, we asked for an appointment. They didn't communicate with us. I don't think civil society is going to have any meetings with Kamala. And this morning, that they said what her agenda is going to be, she's going to meet, and this is very, according to what Miriam was saying, and Dana also, she's going to meet with the big business people. And so instead of meeting with civil society or human rights or speaking about corruption or the topic of protection for migrants in Mexico, it seems that this visit, at least this first visit, is not going to be what we had been hoping for. Thank you, Gretchen. Well, it's very difficult to have to sum up and saying that there's a history of continuity despite the changes in elections, and that what we have is a deepening of a historical relationship that has been corrupted and has been an accomplice among governments. We continue with a challenge that it seemed as though under Trump was deepened, and now we're hoping that it would be reduced. We'd like to change and look at things on the other side, to be able to spend the last time that we have together, to be able to ask each one of you what would be the things that the government of the United States would have to be requesting of the other governments, and also ask you all, what are the things that the United States citizens, those who live in Mexico as well as those who are in the United States, what can they do to help and support a change at this moment? So I go back now, just as we started. Please, Gretchen, we'll start with you, if you would be so kind. Yes, of course. Well, as far as the topic of migration, of course, what we're asking the United States government for is to support and to negotiate with Mexico in order to strengthen its asylum system, and open more offices, have more officials for protection, take away the National Guard out of the topic of migration, because it's militarizing migration. That makes no sense. It just takes us into more corruption and more violations of human rights. Also, we are asking that we continue the dismantling of MPP. We have people who have spent 2 years and are stuck in Mexico that should be able to go back to the United States and continue with their asylum cases there. We're asking the United States to end with Title 42, because the border between Mexico and the United States continues being stopped. It continues being closed. People don't have the ability to cross over to request asylum. And beyond that they work with us in order to have an immigration policy that is much more bold. I don't think that we continue doing the same things, because we're in this cycle of excess flows of immigration, and then people get nervous. Then they ask Mexico to detain people. They contain people, the numbers go down, and then they start to take away the National Guard. Then once again, we're in this cycle when really what we need are ways of being able to have protection for people on a regional level. And I think that in the United States, the government is more open with civil society, to dialogue. And so there are a lot of things that we could do from the United States, and remind people that being where we are here because of the history that Dana mentions and the interventions of the United States over many, many years. Thank you, Gretchen. Then there's some other organizations that are promoting a letter to the 3 presidents of the United States, Guatemala, and Mexico to demand an asylum system instead of expanding the wall and militarization. we are collecting letters of support. Alvaro, please, I would like to ask you, what do you think is the principle that what would the main thing that you would say to the Biden administration when you see that maybe they're going to make an agreement with the prosecutor's office? Why not? What are the threats and what are the opportunities that come if they decided to operate in a different way, if they decided to make a connection with citizenry, for example? I think that there have been some important messages, and in fact, today there was a very important one from the Secretary Blinken because Francisco Sandoval, this prosecutor who's in charge of the cases, is under a lot of threat, and they say that Secretary of State Blinken gave him his public support, and he has been, well, as I was mentioning, he's received international recognition and awards. So I think that this was an important message. I think that for us, it's important also that they see the strengthening of the state of law, the rule of law. It's the economy is being very concentrated. That we need a way to centralize, to diminish migration. What we have to do is have better social conditions. That means less poverty, more education, and there's also an economic elite that is very tied to the political elite. It is completely tamed, that is requesting this development for the country, no? And so I think that for us, it's clear that be recognized, and we know that there are some tools of sanctions that could be used, and that if they wanted to equip that, what this special prosecutor against impunity is doing, to say that he is really the only independent within the Ministry of Justice to sanction some of the people who are really slowing down the work of this special prosecutor, that would be quite helpful. So I think that this is one topic, right? And I think that to maintain support to civil society that has been, we've seen this with messages in one way or another, but I think that to really move into more concrete actions, taking into account that the government was criminalizing. I think that the journalists are really having tremendous harassment, correspondence with the press, and even agents from the United States. I think that they have there are constant attacks and also a blockade from the same sources of the government, so of the APP. And so we ourselves have the perception that the United States is looking poorly now at President Oquel and Juan Orlando, but I think there's better communication with the president of Guatemala. So we see that Giammattei is completely colluding with organized crime, and he supports the parties that have drug dealers and narco deputies, we could call them. So how can we truly break that cycle of this kleptocracy based in the drug dealers? And this cycle is each election it becomes reinforced, because the social problems that immigration causes will never be solved. Thank you so much, Alvaro. And so, Dana, please tell us what is really happening in the United States to change this. You who have been working for so long, advocating and struggling on this way. How can we right now at this moment pressure so that they don't nourish this pact of corruption of Kamala and Biden?
Yes, at this moment we could say that we have some powerful tools, and I'd like to say that Biden and Harris are not going to listen to us. They are working, they're going to continue working with their allies. They have a powerful strategy that they're developing. But in the Senate and the Congress, in the both of houses, we have important allies who are sending a powerful message for 3 bills. And I'm going to write the numbers of the bills in the chat because it's kind of technical, but first of all, and fundamentally, is the Berta Cáceres Human Rights in Honduras Act, which was introduced for the first time in 2016. It's the 4th time that we've tried for it. And 80 Congress people supported it last year. We now have 53. And that it demands the suspension of military and police aid to Honduras, and that there be no other money in loans by transnational international banks to security forces in Honduras. And for the first time in the Senate, there's a broad law proposed by Jeff Merkley called Honduras Human Rights and Anti-Corruption Act, which has the same language as the Berta law about suspending military aid, but also includes sanctions for Juan Orlando. It has, to cut off licenses for weapons, like tear gas and other things that can be used against protesters. Money for the High Commissioner on Human Rights from the UN. And it says that there also should be an anti-corruption commission from the UN, not the OAS. And that's important to distinguish those. So there are now 11 senators, not only the first 8, there are now 11 others, including very powerful people in the leadership of the Senate, such as Senator Durbin and Leahy, Gary Peters, who's the head of Homeland Security, and other more left-wing senators like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. We also have the third bill, same as Merkley, which is in the House of Representatives by Congresswoman Schakowsky. And it is a companion with the Berta Cáceres law. So we already have 26 for that. So it's a grassroots campaign in the United States, and we people who are listening to this to call, write, tweet, do everything on social media to your senators and Congress people, whoever they are, whether they're supporting or not. And I will place the information in the chat, and you can also look for it on the web and find the names of who the co-sponsors are. And those are the ones who have already signed. But if they've already signed, they can pressure their friends and you can get them to sign on as well. So it's very important because it's a message, a powerful message to the Biden government. And there is a momentum, increasing momentum. And so it's incredible. So, for example, grassroots people in Michigan, they won in this area. And also Karen Bass was an important win, a congresswoman who just signed. So this is an important thing to see the power of the grassroots here, like it is in Honduras too. Thank you very much, Dana. And also, it's also important to support this fight of the Garífunas and the Huapinol people and name the cases and seeking justice for Berta Cáceres. So it's not just about military aid. It also mentions these things. Thank you very much, Dana. This has been an important effort that's going on several fronts. Miriam, just as we begin with you, I'd like to talk about how the long night that Honduras has been living, what is the role that can be played by international solidarity? What has been your experience with international solidarity, and what should it be in terms of international solidarity by civil society? And if you want to call to the government of Kamala as well, of course. Thank you very much. I think it's important, Marco, to start with what Dana was talking about. These bills to try to call on senators and other authorities to try to get them to stop the support and military aid to Honduras. I think that is critical. And in that sense, I believe that it's also necessary to bring more people into it and into these initiatives. But I'd like to say something else. In Honduras, we need to get back to the rule of law, Marco. I mean, we're like a political laboratory, and we have not been able to have that clear vision of what it meant to break down the institutions of the country, supposedly in this light state. But a decade later, where are we? We are in a situation which has come from being a political laboratory that has allowed for these conditions to exist in the country. As long as there is no rule of law, where there's a guarantee of the interdependence of the branches of power, we're going to continue in a horrible situation because people are going to keep leaving because there's going to be so much violence. People don't feel safe. They don't have any way out because Honduras, really, it's like it's crumbling that has happened in this past decade. And it has led to people losing hope. People feel like, what can I do? Where can I go? And people say, I'll go north. That's the only answer. But I think aside from reinstating the rule of law in Honduras, we believe that the state and the government of Honduras invest, as our people have said, there must be policies that are very clear, policies so people can stay. I claim the right to stay in Honduras, to build a different nation, a different country. And so solidarity and the policies, like I said at the beginning, what is the policy going to be? What is the role? We're already seeing it. There's not going to be any change because we realize, as a Garifuna, I realize, and as a coordinator of OFRENEC, that things have been closed, our offices have been closed, and people have been deported and sent out. So no policy has changed. If there are no conditions for people to stay, we all have the right to migrate. That's a human right. But we also have the right to build our nation and to live in our own countries. And those conditions are not going to exist with the strategy that is currently being carried out without supporting the community, without supporting the people. And what we'd like to do is we need to talk about the rights of immigrants. And I think it's a serious situation. And we need to deal as a movement in Latin America and here in Central America to focus on that, but also civil society in the United States. We have to create a strategy in the United States as well in order to generate pressure there from social movements, not because of fear of migrants, but as a human right. We have a right to live in our country. It is our country, and to build a different country and not to live in the conditions, inhumane conditions that we're living in, because the way people are treated is inhumane. So I think that is important. Those two things are what I wanted to say. Thank you very much, Marco. So many people have been writing in Facebook, and they say they support poor countries and to open up areas so people can immigrate less. The United States is benefiting from cheap labor. And so perhaps they should focus on developing communities. And the Mexican government is supposedly dealing with corruption. And so that's the ones who should get Claudio X Gonzalez is the Mexican government, and they know that. And also Irma Vicenteño says, Miriam, we should reinstate the rule of law and vindicate the right to stay in your country. Many of you, Alvaro, also have been working with Global Exchange and many other organizations to try to bring an end to the war against drugs as a justification and a platform to be able to help with sovereignty and democracy of countries and not allow the United States to come and impose its own policy based on the war on drugs. So the war on drug needs to end as a requirement in order to find other possibilities. It's 8:53 now. I'd like to hear 2 words from each of you. For those of us who see us, we like to see a better future. What is your opinion, Dana? Well, for us in the United States, the most important thing is that we hear the Honduran people, and we don't have imperialism. We don't have benevolent imperialism that's helping the poor victims. They're not victims. It's not victims. They're very brave people that we should listen to. Thank you, Dana. Alvaro, do you think there's a possible future? Things that should happen before we can talk about this? I believe that we're in a complicated moment. Not only Guatemala, but the entire region. There are 2 important questions and issues. One is decentralization, that we're not concentrated only, at least in Guatemala, in the capital city, but also trying to find alliances in the different departments and provinces to really build up outside of the capital, because it's a country that's very centralized, and also regionalization. So this kind of event help us to get to know each other better and understand the problems that we face and be able to share them and work with them together, what has worked and what we can do in the future. Because I believe these are common problems, very similar problems, and to a large degree, I think this is due to a concentration of power and wealth in very few hands. And so we know, in terms of justice, there's a struggle in that way too, of becoming more democratic countries.
Thank you, Alvaro. Gretchen, you, as many millions of Mexicans, as myself también, we've seen in 2018 a proposal in Mexico for the future, and they really opened our eyes to, it looks like it's more going back to the past. What are the things that have to happen so that a progressive platform, such as one that the administration of AMLO presented, or of Biden, and also even Bukele in El Salvador, that ends up being the opposite? What are the things that would have to happen so that there could be possibilities for a future in our countries? Well, I think that the rhetoric for Morena, of AMLO's presidency, is very encouraging. It always has been. I think that there's been a lot of frustration now as far as the division and the attack that the president has done against civil society. And this division doesn't come into, or you're either with Morena or you're with the opposition, you want to propose a coup. No, this doesn't help for a country to grow. So I think that starting from there has to be a conciliation. There has to be a balance of power. But as such, if we really ask people, would you like to end corruption, which is one of the main points of Morena, people are going to say, no, we all want corruption to end, of course. So I think that there we have to find a balance. I don't know what's going to happen now with these elections on Sunday. But as far as immigration, what I can say is that after having lived through 6 administrations in Mexico, these are the organizations of civil society. They're going to continue doing the work. So whatever else happens, we are not going anywhere. We continue day and night with refuges, welcoming people, putting in complaints, carrying out um, carrying out all kinds of legal issues. So like Miriam was saying, the right to stay, the right to go, the right to protection. And I would start with civil society. And this is long term. It is not just throwing money at the region and hoping that in 3 months people are not going to leave their countries. That's not the way it works. It's a long-term project. It's much beyond the 4 years of one administration or 6 years for AMLO's administration. So that will continue working, of course. I'm completely clear of that, yes. Thank you very much, Gretchen. Miriam, when you presented your opinions as our closing, you tells us that we also have the right to live and to stay in Honduras. Some in the United States would ask, but how if your country is crumbling? You know how to live in Honduras without the presence of the United States. Tell us the resilience, the history of the Garifuna people. Of course. Well, I think that it's important to mention the fact that when I say that we have, and we are vindicating our right to stay, it's that we have to understand that, and sometimes this sounds a little bit bad, or when I say there are different ways of looking at, I have a sister who lives in the United States, several sisters, family members and everyone, and the conditions are terrible. Everyone knows that. When we here have land where people could have more production, a better home, people could live and have well-being. And so why is there this campaign that says, well, if the United States were going to solve everything? But no, they resolve here, but it's true. We live in violent countries, in secure countries with conditions. But I would say also there's the right to struggle. We have to struggle from our homes, from our families, from our lands, from the cities, the urban areas. There's the possibility of living together, of coexisting in a country that, yes, it's broken because we have to rebuild. And this is so important. It has to do with the participation of the communities, with the participation, and to see our lands, yes, they're rural, and I also really liked what Alvaro was saying, is also the urban spaces, because people don't think that a neighborhood, that's also a territory where we can work in urban. So I think that's important, and we have to build. We are doing it, putting into practice from our organization, Ofrane, going to territories, self-sufficient, autonomous. We have common lands. We work on health, holistic health. Yes, it can be done. What happens is that there also is a fear, a terror, and we have to break that. We have to, like as Alvaro said, right now at this moment, there is a camp in front of the Supreme Court demanding justice for Berta. We are there, also struggling, working, because we believe that it's important. It's necessary to raise our voice. But brothers and sisters are there, but also we need to build. It's another model of living together, and I think that that's the topic. This is the gist of the matter, because in Latin America, we have placed our hope in a model of democracy, of exercising democracy only through elections. And we know that these electoral process, which is another topic that Marco in Global Exchange, you'll be working on this in another forum, about how is the topic of elections working, and how is it working in Latin American countries? What is truly happening? Who are making decisions? Who is the president, etc.? And so we have to build different models of living together, because that's the only way that we'll be able to move forward as a country. And I'll repeat, we have the possibility of generating well-being in our countries, because we have the resources. We just have to build it all together. Thank you very much, Miriam. Thank you very much, Dana. Thank you, Gretchen. Thank you, Alvaro. To having all of you here, all of us here, was wonderful. And it's a moment of a lot of reflection. Kamala gets to Mexico on Monday. Guatemala on Monday. And then Tuesday to Mexico. And well, it's clear, based on your analysis, that Kamala is coming, as always, coming to defend and to propose policies based on strategic regional interests of the United States, But the question that you all leave hanging is up to what point the United States and the governments in the region are going to be able to hide and cover up, covering the pipe up with gum. Because this administration will once again try to tighten up a pipe that doesn't work, or really bet and really look to change the whole structure. The society knows. So we've heard 5 voices from the United States to Honduras. We want authentic democracy, a balance of power, mobility, the right to stay. The agenda is very clear. The agenda is written. We only need the governments to not lose any time, because it's clear in these last 30 years that as long as there are change, everything still goes back if the population is not benefited from those changes. Thank you so much. We greet you from Global Exchange, and we are accompanying you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Greetings to all. We'll see you. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Marco. We'll see you, Dana. Okay, I need to write you, please. Okay, I have a project.